Alice Moseley is not your typical folk artist. In fact, she didn't start painting till she was 65 years old.
Well, I started painting when I was 65. We had moved my mother from Birmingham to Memphis to live with us, and she had Alzheimer's and didn't know who I was for 4 years. And I was teaching full time, but it was hard.
Alice Moseley, a native of Birmingham, Alabama, would come to Bay St. Louis in 1988. She purchased her beloved blue house, and out of this home and studio, she would sell her artwork to so many people on the Mississippi Gulf Coast.
Mrs. Moseley lived in her beloved blue house for 14 years, painting up into her early 90s.
Repeat customers would not only come to see the amazing art, but also to catch a glimpse of her wonderful dog, Herman.
I didn't start for any reason in the world but therapy. Had no idea of ever doing a thing with it. Wouldn't even let my husband look at it. I was so self-conscious.
Mrs. Moseley passed away at the age of 94 in 2004, and in present day, her artwork lives on to inspire future generations at the Alice Moseley Museum of Folk Art in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. It's in a historic train depot that is the perfect location to showcase her unique art.
Hi. Good, thank you. How are you? Alice Moseley's paintings show an idealistic view of life in the American South. Mrs. Moseley was inspired by the stories and memories of her life and those around her.
Alice would often quip, "I don't even know what folk art is," and she used acrylic paint versus oils because oils took just too long.
She often experimented with some of her artworks, gluing things like rocks, metal, twigs, and other materials into her pieces, giving them both texture and dimension.
I like it, though. I like that rough finish on it.
That was the very first thing you painted?
It's one of the first, because I use these cedar shingles.
Paintings like Memories of Fredonia Church show the importance of religion and the church in the southern communities. By looking at her work, one can get a sense of life in the South, what people ate, where people worked, and how people lived. These paintings take us on a journey through the early 20th century, giving us a glimpse of the traditions, culture, and landscapes of the South.
Possibly Alice's most famous work, one that was also featured in Southern Living magazine, "The House is Blue, but the Old Lady Ain't." The painting is absolutely quintessential Alice. The painting shows a happy Alice and her dog Herman. Her son Tim loves to tell a story about this house. As we drove down St. Stanislaus, an old man was sitting on the wall down here, looking like he had just been abandoned by his last friend. My mom looked over at him and said, "Lord, I hope that's not me in 2 or 3 months." She later painted her house in a vivid Wedgwood blue. As I was leaving her house one day, I happened to look over where the old man had been sitting, and into my head popped the thought, the house is blue, but the old lady ain't. Alice Moseley lived in that blue house until her death in 2004. The house remained blue, but the old lady had 15 of the happiest years of her life living there and had very few blue days.
I was born in Birmingham, Alabama, and married there when I was 25, and incidentally at 25 then I was an old maid. All my friends had already married, and here I was at 25 still single. But when I met my husband, we took care of that. We were married 46 years. He came from Batesville, Mississippi. That's how I got back in this part of the country. He always wanted to go back to Batesville when we retired, and we did, and had 8 good years before his illness.
the heart of it all, Alice Moseley was a storyteller, and as time goes by, her works will live on telling stories of the past with timeless and enduring sentiment.
Some of her work features iconic locations like Graceland and Elvis's birthplace in Tupelo, while other paintings take on a more simple approach, such as Wild Cherries Are for the Birds. In this painting, the viewer sees blue jays happily overindulging in a meal of fermenting cherries and suffering the consequences of their excesses. Alice could be both humorous and whimsical, and would often paint animals with human-like characteristics and countenances. The two birds in hats, for instance, along with the poor bird who's laying on the ground, clearly sleeping off the drunkenness.
Alice even painted her signature with little red dots reminiscent of cherries.
I'm not a formally trained artist. I only paint what I feel and what I know. And I'm smart enough not to paint everything I know. I tell a lot of my stories, but some of them I leave out for reasons you won't hear about.
Early in her career, Alice Moseley, having finished her first 40 works of art, went to the Nashville flea market with her son and sold all 40 of her paintings within 30 minutes. They were purchased by a Mr. Barr, who used them to decorate his chain of steakhouses in Kentucky. That was the day that Alice Moseley became a professional folk artist. After her mother passed away, Alice decided to try her luck selling her work at flea markets. To her delight, her work sold well, and she started to attract the notice of art critics and galleries. After her husband's retirement, the couple moved to Pope, Mississippi, where they lived until her husband's death.
Luck, or perhaps fate, brought Alice to Bay St. Louis. In 1988, she received invitations to attend art shows in cities all across the United States. Her assistant chose the Beachfront Festival in Bay St. Louis, and at the spry age of 80 years old, she loaded up her car and drove to Old Town Bay St. Louis, where she met Jerry Dixon, the unofficial artist ambassador for the Bay, and fell in love with the town. Alice said, "Now that's not a coincidence. That's my destiny. I had never heard of Bay St. Louis, much less been there."
I think every move we make serves a purpose. It takes us a while to see what it was sometimes.
Alice Moseley painted until her death in July of 2004 at the age of 94. Her blue house in Bay St. Louis was untouched by Hurricane Katrina, even though it's only a half-mile from the beach. Her son, Tim Moseley, founded the Alice Moseley Folk Art and Antique Museum after Katrina in 2006, and since 2013, it has been housed at its current location, the historic Bay St. Louis Train Depot.
Mrs. Moseley loved the idea of her works of art being displayed for the community under one condition: that it always be free to see. You can certainly purchase many of her works of art, even in puzzle form, but to see them, you'll never pay anything.
Life is so daily. It was one of my early prints, and the janitor in my school gave me that title. He was 70 years old, but one of the wisest men I've ever known in my life. He wasn't smarty wise, he was just wisdom wise. And he gave me a number of titles, and I walked by him one morning and he said, "Miss Alice, life is so daily." So this painting is Life is So Daily, and it's one of my very favorite ones.
Recently, there's been a lot of excitement over Amtrak's resuming service, the Mardi Gras line, which connects New Orleans and Mobile, Alabama. Now, this is going to bring with it a lot of new people coming into the community, especially Bay St. Louis, through the old train depot. But unfortunately, the Alice Moseley Folk Art Museum is in a precarious place.
The Bay St. Louis City Council opted to maintain a month-to-month lease for the Alice Moseley Folk Art Museum. This decision could jeopardize grant funding for the museum and raises questions about balancing urban development with cultural preservation.
Bay St. Louis Mayor Mike Favre has said that all the talk about the Alice Moseley Folk Art Museum supposedly going away is just drama. He is open to a long-term lease, but currently all city-owned buildings are going through review. What will that mean for the Alice Moseley Museum? We'll have to wait and see.
I don't know whether I care about being remembered so much. I wouldn't mind. I don't think I'd mind. Depends on where I go. To thine own self be true. That's it. And I used to tell them, if you will do that, if you'll be true to yourself, everything else will work out. I think that's a powerful statement, and I'd like to leave that. Not just for students, but for everyone. Because we're not always true with ourselves. We tell it the way we want to hear it. So that's be my one line.